Georgia lawyers Bob and Irreverent D talk law. Listen up for stories about how things really happen in our legal system. Who are these guys? Dwayne Singleton, Irreverent D, is a criminal defense attorney in the state of Georgia. Benjamin O. Benson, aka Bob, is a personal injury attorney in Atlanta. On today's episode, Bob and Irreverent D turn into Max Headroom.
Fraud.
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 Now, sit back and take a listen as Bob and Irreverent D talk law.
You should stop by the office. The garden's looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not intentional, is it? It's
It is
just weeds.
intentional. No, we built a whole raised bed for it. Lettuce, kale.
Are you doing that green foot or square foot gardening thing?
It's one of these little,
It's like a box, right?
yeah,
You divide it into 9 squares like a tic-tac-toe box?
sort of, yeah.
Yeah. I did that years ago. It was
So-
really cool.
The bottom layer is like just rocks, and then you do logs, then you do leaves, and then you do your topsoil. So
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good for my mental health.
It's also done at ground level, I understand. Which means you have to bend over.
No, ours is a raised bed.
Oh, it's up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to episode of the Bob and Irreverent D Talk Law podcast. You are joining us today because we have something super important to talk about, and that is the F word. Fraud. Today we're talking about fraud. Today's episode.
It's not F the police.
It's not F the police. That was another
My
episode.
client's favorite thing to
No.
say.
Right. Nope. It's fraud.
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 And you will learn what fraud means. You'll learn about what the difference between fraud and just like, something that's bad. And you will learn this term that we call plead with particularity. Right?
We're getting to the weeds now.
Let's
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get
All
them.
right. This episode brought to you by our friend, Dwayne Singleton. Dwayne, how can people find you?
If you get in a bind, give me a call, DwayneSingleton.com, or you can reach us at 770-227-5300. We answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We'll be glad to help you out with your legal needs.
Yes.
There you go.
If you get in a bind, we'll get you a bond.
Maybe.
Have you thought about that?
Get in the bind, get you a bond.
Get you a bond? That's like a nice catchphrase.
I get so tired of fighting for bonds. So tired.
Yeah. If
You
you
should just give them. Just give
them?
freely. Yes.
to criminals who are sitting
Alleged.
alleged
innocent
criminals,
people.
right? Alleged
waiting for
criminals,
trial.
right? But I mean, really, if you're still stuck in jail, it's for a really good reason, right? I mean, first of all, they wouldn't arrest you if you didn't do it,
And judges know.
and judges know better
that
than
you
everybody
did it,
else.
'cause
Right.
the DA said you did it.
That's right. That's right.
So you must have did it.
Yeah, and to question their impartiality.
Why
would be,
have trials at all?
seriously?
Just put the fact pattern into ChatGPT. Let
Right.
it spit out an answer. Done.
Chat GPT is making
Done.
decisions for us
Done.
anyways. Why even bother?
There's Norman Gladwell's book. He talks about talking to strangers. He talks about that judges are less accurate than chance at making proper decision on cases. As to whether
How does he get to decide?
they did a big study about whether or not somebody would reoffend if allowed. It was about a bond situation, like whether or not somebody would get in trouble if they were on bond. And they did just a random selection, and then they did where the judges actually decided. They looked at 2 different places, and the judges were less accurate than just chance.
Less accurate meaning like the judge.
Determining whether or not somebody would reoffend or
Okay.
have problems in the future. The judge was just
wrong.
just as raw as guessing.
Yeah, but you could say that about referees and umpires,
Sure.
right? I mean,
But judges are supposed to be referees and umpires, but they want to play ball still.
That's really the problem, right?
Sometimes they take this,
We
they
keep
get the
missing
bat
that.
and start swinging. And
They're supposed to be the impartial justice. They're supposed to, like you, the defense attorney, are supposed to be arguing with the state, and the judge is supposed to be this impartial person who is calling balls and strikes. And it really doesn't work out that way. There's a law, and then there's what happens.
well, and that's because we're dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
People have their own prejudice, biases, personalities, stuff like that. Just give it to ChatGPT; they'll figure it out.
Right? Why not? I've played with the Chat GPT thing, and so far I've only really gotten it to do nothing more than parlor games.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's just kind of like, hey, watch this. You can make it, write a limerick.
Right.
And it's really great for when you do that, and my daughter just goes nuts. She's like, how does it do that? Right? And it is. It's a very good
I
parlor
wrote
trick.
a song about my neighbor's lawnmower going around the neighborhood. Old Puffer. He has
Old
a
Puffer?
racing lawnmower. They now think I'm like some genius songwriter.
Genius
I haven't
songwriter,
broke it to them yet. That I didn't do it.
I wonder if like Muff the Tragic Wagon was secretly written
Maybe.
post hoc by ChatGPT. I'm sure that's what happened. Muff the Tragic Wagon.
So let's talk about fraud.
Let's talk about fraud, and let's talk about judges making judgment calls.
Yes.
And that is the news item is this. And I'm going to read this to you. Understand, audience. Irreverent D and I have not talked about this beforehand. Unlike most of our episodes where we're like sitting and saying, "Okay, you say this and I'll say this," or whatever.
I
This
had
is
to work,
this
and
is
I was late getting here.
This is completely blind.
Yeah.
Completely blind. He has
Here we
no
go.
idea what we're about to talk about. Here is the headline: DeKalb County judge denies plaintiff attorney, who's the defendant in this case.
The plaintiff's attorney is the defendant.
Crazy.
Okay.
His attempts to dismiss lawsuit brought by his former client.
Okay.
All right. So here's the fact pattern. Here's what happened, according to the complaint. 1.
And everything contained in the complaint is true.
Well, I mean, until it's denied, sure. That's the thing. Of course, it's true. It's averred, right? It's averred, and unless you file a pleading that says no, that's not true, then it absolutely is true.
Right.
Right. Okay. It's true until proven false. So, here's what happened. The plaintiff, we'll call her Jane.
That's my mom's name.
It's not.
I like Jane.
Anyways, Jane hires to protect the people who have not been convicted yet. We'll call him plaintiff's lawyer.
Okay.
Okay, Jane hires plaintiff's lawyer because she was hit in hit and run
Okay.
accident, collision.
Okay.
We prefer to use the word collision. Accidents suggest I peed in my pants, right? This was an I peed in my pants accidentally. This was I ran into the back of something and then fled from the scene,
Right.
right? So Jane hired her attorney.
Okay.
Her attorney filed a lawsuit against the unknown person. We call them a John Doe. Now, when you file a lawsuit against a John Doe, you don't really know who to serve.
Right.
That's a problem, because in order for there to be a valid lawsuit, there has to be service. Let's talk first about service.
Well, in this situation, you got to file something so you can do some discovery, so you can figure out what happened in some cases. But service just means that I have given the paperwork to the sheriff of that county, and they have taken it out and handed it to the person. That way the clock starts ticking once they've received it. Now they have legal notice that they've received a lawsuit, and so they've got so much time to answer it. Yes.
Okay. Why can't you just email it to them?
Right. Because the problem with that would be maybe some people would just say they emailed it.
Okay. But you could prove whether you emailed something, right? You just
Or
look up on the
it got
thing.
emailed out and you overlooked it,
Didn't see it.
didn't see it, you missed it, right?
Raise your hand if you've ever not seen an email that was actually turned out to be important.
And so with a lawsuit where we're trying to attach or make somebody pay some money or damages, we want to make sure that they got a copy of the lawsuit and had a time to respond.
Okay.
Right.
Why can't you just mail it then?
In magistrate court on some things you can mail service certified mail.
Like a dispossessory,
Right.
whatever. You
But
just post it, right?
In most things, though, you have to actually have the sheriff take it out and physically hand it to somebody, and then the sheriff has to fill out a proof of service. He has to say, I served Dwayne Singleton at this address, or I served his spouse living
Or
at
some
the
adult
address
there, right.
at this time.
Right. So the way I explain it to my clients is, look, in court, this is the only place really in the world that you can be permanently deprived of your liberty, of your property, your money. And if we're going to do that,
In a criminal case, it could be your life.
could be your life.
Right.
That's right. It is in court. The police can detain you. They can put you in jail for a couple of years while you await trial.
Right.
Right? Somebody, the IRS, could impound your money, right? But none of that is permanent. The only time it can become permanent is in a court,
Right.
right? And if we're going to do that, the one place in the world where you can be deprived of this permanently is the court. If we're going to do this, it is so serious that we have to make sure you know
Right.
you can be deprived of your property or your liberty.
Right.
Right. And so it's that important. You have to be given a copy. That's service.
And that's the first thing the judge looks at. When was service?
Right.
Have they answered? Have they had enough time to answer? Is discovery time over? When did they get service? Because the clock doesn't start ticking until they get service. The same thing goes, though, for like a statute of limitations. You got to get service
Now we're going to talk about
before your
this.
statute runs, or you got
How prescient. How forward-thinking of you, Dwayne.
Well,
Because, and again, I swear, we have not talked about this beforehand.
We've been doing this for a minute.
But this is also not our first rodeo. Dwayne knows where I'm going. This is what comes up in this case. And it's very interesting. What happens, I happen to have been so curious about this that I had my paralegal download the actual original complaint so I could figure out what happened. Just so you have context, what ultimately happens is the plaintiff's attorney, Jane, or the plaintiff, Jane, thinks that her lawyer screwed up, so she sued the lawyer.
Oh, a little malpractice there.
Nope,
No.
not what you think.
Uh-oh.
Not malpractice, the F word.
Fraud?
Fraud. We're going to talk about that in a second. The F word is what she accused her attorney of. But here, back to the underlying case.
Okay.
The attorney, before everything goes south, the attorney files a lawsuit, and then no one would have thought this could happen. The attorney figures out who the person was. This hardly ever happens. Can we pause here for just a minute and talk about this one? There's a client we both have, right? She's Batwoman.
Okay.
Batwoman is driving down the road minding her own business when she gets rear-ended by this truck. She pulls over like a dutiful citizen, like a responsible person. She pulls over to the side of the road. She thinks the truck is going to do the same thing. You know what happens?
He leaves.
Not only does he leave, Irreverent D, he leaves, and the kid sitting in the back of the truck takes a towel and holds it over the tag. So that when Batwoman becomes outraged that this person is fleeing from the scene, what happens?
Cover the tag, Junior. We got to get out of here.
Cover the tag. They can't know that it's us.
Right.
Takes a towel and covers the tag. Well, it's a kind of a small community, Dwayne. And so Batwoman figures out there ain't but so many royal blue Ford Rangers in this community. She's patrolling around for months looking for this truck.
Right.
Finally, she sees the truck. She's absolutely certain that this is the same truck.
Right.
She takes a picture of the tag, sends it to us, and we say, gosh, if there was only some way that we as private citizens could find out, who owns a truck with this tag number. Because you can't just call, this isn't Florida or California where you can just call the DMV and say, hey, I want you to run a tag for me.
Right.
Like, you have to have a police, you have to have...
Well, when the police run it, there's documents of that, and they can't just run random tags.
They get in trouble for that, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's another story here. Yeah, okay. There was that happened
Right.
where a police officer got super, super trouble,
Right.
rightfully so, because they were starting to run tags from boyfriends of ex-girlfriend.
Right.
But yeah, okay. I remember this story now.
Yeah.
We're going to have to cover that in another episode. But you can't just start running tags.
No.
We found some legal way to run this tag.
Right.
And to find out. There is a way that you can do it. If you want to find out how to do it legally,
Hire a
please
lawyer.
call my office. I'll tell you how to do it legally. There's a legal way to do it. So we found out who it was, and we said, all right, we're going to sue this person who owns the truck. And so we did, and then it turned out that the person who owned the truck eventually fessed up and said it was my son.
It wasn't me. It was him.
Can't do anything about it because son died.
Oh.
It was terrible and a completely different
Right.
thing. It was awful. But it can happen every once in a while if someone flees the scene of a collision that you can figure out who it was.
But it's hard because
It is not easy at all.
These DOT cameras that you see up and all these cameras
just
you see
get
at the
the
intersection,
get the cameras.
they hardly work. They never record. They can't track what day. They can't download the stuff for you. It's like pulling teeth to find any of that stuff. Convenience stores that have cameras, the camera wouldn't work. It's like tracking this stuff down is more difficult than people think. It's definitely not CSI.
Is definitely difficult. It reminds me of a client's case we're working on now, where actually the police officer found my client at fault. And when my client was talking to me about it, he said, "Well, I don't know how we can win." I said, "Well, tell me. I mean, did you do something wrong?" "No, I didn't do something wrong. My light was green." Right? But the police officer, accused me of it, and so I said, "Well, frankly, love you. Don't care what the police officer thinks. If I like you, we're going to do this." Right? It turns out the police officer went into the Circle K, watched the video feed, recorded it with his body cam, watched all of it on his body cam, and it's perfectly recorded on his body cam. And you can see in the video how my client's definitely not at fault. You can absolutely tell. Right? And so all of that, just because the police officer kept his body cam on while he went inside and looked at actually investigated the case, even though he was dead set against my client. Right. Anyways, so so back to this case. Jane's attorney does a bang up job, right, and finds out who this hit and run person is, and then tries to serve that person, but can't because he can't find her. What are the odds? You do a good job.
Figure out who it is.
You figure out who it is.
And now
and
she's moved 10 times. You can't find her.
You can't find her.
Right.
I have this happen every once in a while. My client says, I don't understand. In this day and age, how are you having a difficult time finding somebody? Have you had this?
Oh, yeah.
What do you say?
I mean, if they move enough, rapidly enough, and don't change their address and don't change their driver's license and don't get new credit cards, it's hard to find people. It's a lot harder than people think.
Right, because I'd think about my own personal life, right? Like, it's easy to find me.
You're secure, stable in one place.
I'm secure, stable. I'm in one place. I own a house.
Right.
You could find me in property search. I own a business. You could find, like, my business name is also my name, right? Like, you could find a lot about me, just by doing. Don't stalk me, guys. But you could find a lot about me. But if you were trying to find one of my cousins, for example, my cousin Jane, completely coincidence that her name is Jane. She is on her mother's cell phone bill. So she doesn't have a cell phone. She's on somebody else's cell phone bill. She lives with her boyfriend, not on a lease, right? Not named on a lease. Even if she was named on a lease, how would you find it?
Right.
Right? There aren't white pages anymore. There aren't, everything on her Facebook page, everything on her whatever pages, just say she lives in Canton, right? So, like, how would you find Jane?
Right.
You can't. Yeah. Anyways.
That's why law enforcement loves Facebook.
Because at least
give all your information. You tell everybody exactly where you're at. And then they got metadata of exactly where you filmed it. And everybody's like, but it's private. I'm like, it's not
It's
private.
not private. You just published it.
It was a private message. How did they read it? It's Facebook. It's not
Facebook.
private.
That's right. Yeah. You just published it. Published. Yes. So anyways, so they find her, but they can't serve her because they don't know where she is.
Right.
Then she does have an insurance company, the defendant. Her insurance...
and all this time, just so everybody knows, there's a clock ticking. You got 2 years, right?
Clock's been way gone.
And so you've got to show that you've diligently continued to search for them this whole time, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually what happens is that the plaintiff's attorney, that Jane's attorney, files a motion for service by publication. Let's pause there and talk about what that means. We could do this for two episodes, right, talking about these subject matters. But service by publication means what?
So a lot of people try to do this in divorce cases because they don't want to fight with their spouse, right?
Yeah.
So they'll come in and say, I don't know where they are. Can't we just publish for them?
Right.
Right. Even though they do know where they are.
Right.
So you've got to attempt service. You got to try to serve at their last known address.
Maybe they're living with new girlfriend or whatever.
Wherever. Right. Try to get them served there. Then you have to file a motion and ask for the court's permission to attempt to serve them by publication, which means you just run it in the paper, and they have so many days to respond.
What's the problem with that? Everybody reads the paper?
Well, the problem with that is nobody reads the paper anymore.
Ah, right.
You know, it's...
And the paper that it's in, people definitely don't read.
So it's whatever the legal organ is for that town, which
sounds
every
dirty.
town has a legal
Watch your mouth.
organ, right?
Legal organ.
Right. And then in some stuff, you know, they go to the judge, and the judge says, no, I'm not going to let you publish. Y'all need to keep trying. Right?
The last hearing that I had, that happened.
Right.
Right. In fact,
you haven't tried hard enough. Try harder.
That, and you know, with the judge, I think rightfully, even though it puts me at a disadvantage, the judge rightfully says, listen, it's not enough that you can't find them. Right? That's your problem.
Because they know nobody's going to answer when you publish. Very few times does anybody answer when you publish.
Well, and that goes back to the original whole reason why we insist on personal service.
Right.
Right? Publishing is even more anonymous, even more likely to be overseen than sending an email or sending a letter.
Well, and a lot of these laws fall back to, you know, when everybody did read the paper,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody lived in a small community, and everybody know. I mean, I
Right.
personally think all this stuff should be online now, and then you should be able to, you know, post it on some place, because
The whole point is that you know something is happening.
on civil forfeitures, we still post those in the courthouse on the wall.
It doesn't have to be anywhere else.
Right? We tack it on the wall. Nobody goes in that courthouse and looks
We
at
covered
those,
that in like episode 3
except for lawyers.
or 4.
Right.
Yeah. The thing is, every judge I've ever been in front of has said, look, it's not just enough that you can't find them. you have to show that they're evading service, or trying to evade service,
Right.
which is a different thing, right? Evading service is like the sheriff says in his little affidavit, I knocked on the door. I saw a person roughly just like matching the description of the defendant.
So they refused to come to the door.
And they wouldn't come to the door.
Right.
Right. That would be evading service.
And sometimes what the judge will do is like, well, why don't you try a special process server? So then you hire a PI.
We do all the time.
You
Yeah.
appoint them as a special process server, and then they'll wait in the bushes outside work with a picture of him, and like, just like you see on TV where they throw the papers at you.
Right.
Like,
You've
"You're
been served.
Right.
You've been served. Right.
Yeah.
So they never could get service on this defendant. The judge did allow them to get service by publication, and frankly, I don't understand how. Now, you can get service by publication if you're not trying to get personal jurisdiction over the person. You're only trying to get at your your uninsured motorist stuff.
Right, because you've got this service, but you don't have a person to get the money out of.
That's right. Yeah. At any rate, so the judge allows them to do service by publication, but then it's 4 years after the injury, 2 years after the statute of limitations has run.
And they're just now running in the paper.
And they're just now running it in the paper, and that's also not bad. It's not irremediable.
Right.
Irremedial. You can't get out of it. You can get out of it.
There is a remedy.
There is a remedy. Right. You could fix this, right? Then the fix, there's this thing in Georgia called the renewal statute, and we can talk about this at length. But the thing is, if you get service on the person eventually, you can dismiss the thing yourself and refile it, get service on them again, and the statute of limitations just really kind of doesn't matter.
Right.
If you want to learn about that, please call me. Like, don't rely on this 15-second version of what is a really complicated
thing. A lot more
thing.
Complicated than that, because you can mess up, you can dismiss your case and not be allowed to refile.
That's right.
Right.
Right. And that's what happened.
Oh.
According to the complaint, the judge dismissed the case.
Okay.
And if the judge dismisses your case, you cannot refile.
Right.
Because it wasn't dismissed without prejudice. It was dismissed with prejudice. Then, according to the complaint, this complaint for fraud, the plaintiff's attorney decided to withdraw from representation because we don't have a good relationship anymore. Didn't say anything about the fact that the lawsuit had been essentially dismissed, that the defendant had been dismissed. Didn't say anything about that, according to this complaint. Okay. Now, as we caution, just because it says it in the complaint doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Right.
There was an answer, and that says no, it didn't happen. So, according to the complaint, though, that's what happened. And so, but the thing that's interesting is that that Jane did not sue her attorney for malpractice. Jane sued the attorney for fraud. And that's what kind of gets my brain working.
So is the judge not allowing the attorney out of the case? He not allowing them to withdraw?
Oh, no,
he already allowed
that's
them
all
to
gone.
withdraw?
That's all gone. The new lawsuit is
Right.
Jane finds a different lawyer,
Okay.
sues the prior lawyer
Okay.
for fraud.
Okay.
Okay? And so the headline
So he's saying
is
he didn't just screw up, he straight up lied to me.
he defrauded me.
Okay.
Right? Now, what we told you earlier is that we would talk about pleading with particularity. If you're going to accuse somebody of fraud, our law says you have to be super, super, super specific.
Right.
Like on January 5th, he said this, and that was intended to cover up the fact that there was a body in his backyard.
You can't just say it was fraud.
You can't just say it was fraud. You can't just say it was negligent. You can't whatever. You have to plead with particularity. Now, as I read this complaint, it's pretty particular. It's very particular about like what the new attorney is saying that the old attorney did that was fraudulent, right? And they sued this attorney for $1 million.
Wow.
Now, the amount in controversy that could have been gotten if the case was handled correctly was about $25,000. That tells me something about why you would file a lawsuit against your attorney for fraud versus malpractice.
Right. Because otherwise it would only be worth $25,000.
Right. Maybe attorney fees.
Right.
Right. If you're suing for fraud, you can sue for $1 million. Well,
Right.
$1 million. Right. Those are my damages. I was completely deprived of justice.
And the hope is you get a bunch of people in there that in your jury that hate lawyers and don't like it and don't want to be there, and they're like, sure, we'll give them $1 million.
Right.
Right.
No. We'll compromise, but we'll only give them a quarter of it, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the real interesting part. Now we've
So now, as an attorney, though, I mean, this is
how do you avoid this?
right, because you don't have to represent somebody, right? You don't have to take a case.
That's right.
But once you,
you do if you want to keep the lights on.
Undertake it, right? You've got certain duties to your client. Just like if I go to trial and I lose a criminal case, okay?
I'd be pretty irresponsible.
I can't just say to the client, see ya, okay? I have to file a motion for new trial.
Why?
Because I have to. Because he's sitting in jail and he has no way to do it on his own, and he might get lost in the system. And he's only got 30 days
To file like a habeas, whatever.
So to file your motion for new trial and your notice of appeal, right?
Okay. All right.
Now, after I've done that and I've made sure he's handed off, then I can withdraw
Okay.
from the case. But just to abandon a client in jail and be like, whatever.
Sorry you lost, but I told you might. Right. Yeah.
You know, and now, so we're expected to file these, basically a boilerplate motion that says I'm out. Not that I'm asking for a new trial.
Right.
But, judges get mad at that because then you file a boilerplate motion. They're like, I did everything I was supposed to do. It was in there.
Right. They get offended.
Right? You're like, Judge, I'm required. This is what I'm required to do.
My ethical duty
I'm
is.
not trying to hurt your feelings, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put everything against the wall, and the other lawyer can figure it out. That's going to
handle the appeal. Yeah. So what this plaintiff Jane is accusing the prior attorney of is not telling her what's going on, like actively hiding from her what happened
for 4 years.
Well, for a couple of years, anyways.
Right.
Right. So that it is the lawyer's ethical duty to tell their clients about both good things and bad things that happen in their case. The question is, well, I mean, if you were sitting in the shoes of the plaintiff's attorney in that case, how would you have handled things differently? Like, what could you have done?
That's the dilemma, right? Somebody comes to you a month before their statute of limitations runs, right? And you've got to get something filed.
Right.
But you don't know that the defendant is missing and is gone and you can't get service on him. So you go ahead and file, and then you can't get service. You're like, golly, now this case can be a giant pain in the butt.
Right.
I'm going to work on it forever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to get paid.
Right.
Because I can't get service on him.
Right.
I want out, but you're stuck.
You're stuck because that's what you signed up for.
Right, because now you've signed up for it. So you get in this situation where do we just leave clients out there and be like, hey,
shouldn't have waited so long.
You got 2 months till your statute runs. See you, buddy. Or do you
I will not
the
do that.
lawsuit for them?
Yeah.
Try to protect their rights and just explain to them what the process is. But I think this goes back to good bedside manner. Okay.
Right.
If you're communicating with your clients, and it's tough because we have trials and we've got things that we've got to do other than.
Yeah, and we're a business, and every once in a while a mistake will happen.
But you've got to let them know what's going on.
I had that happen one time where, we just made a mistake in our filings, and it was potentially fatal to our client's case. And I sat down, I deliberated about it. I said, man, this is not good. But there's a dividing line, right, between, do you hide it, or do you say, hey, look, this looks bad, I'm going to try and fix it, and this is what I'm going to try and do to fix it.
Right.
And what these people in the lawsuit against the prior lawyer are saying is, there was that dividing line, and you should have said, hey, this is what happened.
Right.
Right.
Well, but law, like medicine, like religion, is one of those professions that you don't get to make mistakes at.
That's right.
Right? I mean, everybody expects you to do it 100% right, 100% of the time, and we're just people. Like, there's going to be mistakes made here and there. You just got to make sure
you hope you don't do the boneheaded ones.
Right. Make sure you have systems in place to protect yourself.
That's right. That's right. But, I mean, they have to be able to rely on us as professionals and know that we're not going to make boneheaded mistakes.
Right.
That's true. Or if there are bad things that happen, that at least they know what's going on.
Right.
There's an academic question that goes along the lines of, well, okay, so if the complaint is true and the plaintiff's attorney failed to respond to the motion to dismiss and the judge dismissed it, and that's obviously an error.
Right.
May not have made a difference. Right,
At all.
like he may not have been able to do anything about it. And when I talk to clients at the beginning, when we talk about litigation, I talk to them about service and how difficult service can be. And I say, look, love you, but if this person cannot be found, we're really just kind of screwed.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't know how any other way to put it, but you need to know this. There are certain things that are in my control. Filing the lawsuit on time, absolutely in my control.
And it's hard to explain some of that stuff to some people sometimes, because I've had somebody not too long ago call. It was something that was like 10 years old, and they were wanting to file a lawsuit. And I explained to them that they couldn't, and they could get a second opinion from another attorney. And of course, the first thing they do is go to Google.
Right.
I don't know why everybody says this guy's so wonderful. He sucks. And I'm like,
they're not Googling what a statute of limitations is. They're going to Google to write you a bad review.
It's not that I don't want to help you. I want to help you.
Yeah.
I can't help you. Yeah. Like, I can't take on your case because there's nothing I can do.
There's literally nothing I can do.
Yeah.
I'll finish with this. There was a client I had where I swore up and down to them, look, you waited too long. There's nothing we can do. But, let's just try it.
Right.
Let's just see.
Let's see what happens.
It's not too far. It's a little bit out, right? Maybe something will happen, right? And they're like, you'll try it? Because I'm sure, I didn't ask them, but I'm pretty sure they must have talked to like
5 other attorneys. They were like, you're dead.
I like to think that I'm the first person that people call, but every once in a while, maybe I'm not the first person.
Right.
Maybe I might be the second, I might be the third, whatever the case. They were just thrilled that I would even try. And it turns out that there was just something that happened, right? Something that I had not counted on. I just said, let's just try it. You understand there's some chance that I can't find this person. I can't serve them. They're like, yeah, okay, I got it. But you'll try? Yeah, I'll try. Okay. And if you have that kind of rapport with somebody, well, then you can kind of maybe take a little bit more risk as long as they understand it's a risk, right? And in those circumstances, I have them, I write down on a piece of paper, doesn't have to be fancy. I say, we both understand this is a long shot.
Right.
Right. And we're going to.
But you put them in writing, so you're protecting yourself. You're protecting them, letting them know exactly what's
because
going
it's
on.
my duty to inform them. Right. It turns out what had happened was that the defendant had been they had been cited as being at fault for the wreck. And it didn't occur to me, the statute of limitations, I do know this, that the statute of limitations is told for as long as that person's citation is still outstanding.
Right.
Right? But it didn't occur to me that they still had it going on.
Still fighting it 3 years later.
2 years later, they still had not had a trial, and it just been kicked down the road, blah, 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 blah. I still had 2 more years before I even had to file before the statute ran.
But that's one of those things that
when you
talk to the client, there's no way you know.
You can't know.
Because you don't know until you go pulling records from the courthouse.
Even then.
Right.
Yeah. Even then, you might not know.
Yeah.
Anyways. All right. What I do know is that we're done.
Oh, we didn't get to talk about my fraud case.
We're going to have to talk about your fraud case next
later.
time. I feel like we've been talking for 40 minutes.
We have.
It's been a long time.
That's all right.
All right. Well, we're going to have to catch up on that on the next episode when we talk about do I get to talk about what we're going to talk about in the next episode, or producer Steve, are you going to be like monkeying around with the order of things? So I can't really talk about it.
We can do these in order.
We can do it in order. Okay. So next one we're going to be talking about Florida and their tort reform. Ooh.
It's a bad word.
Listen, and here's the thing.
I thought tort reform was deep.
Pigs get fat. Hogs get slaughtered. You need to know this because that, in my view, is the theme of Florida tort reform. Is our brethren, the plaintiffs' attorneys, just got too, I don't want to say greedy, but they just got too fat. And there were excesses.
Some of us have difficulty with our weight, Ben.
Well, I'm going to shame you about it. On to the next episode.
We eat too many
Thank you
hot
for
dogs.
joining us. I'm Ben Benson of the Bob Law Firm. If you've been injured in an auto collision or if you're injured in a slip and fall, I need you to call me. I'll represent you if I like you, and I'll take care of your business.
If the SWAT team's outside your house, just film them with your phone and hand it to your brother or sister after they take you to jail and give me a call.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time when Bob and Irreverent D talk law.